Hi, everyone. This is a Leadership with Heart podcast, and this is Heather Younger, your host. Employee experience is powered by emotions. Managers and or leaders within organizations get to choose which emotions they unleash from within the people they lead. Leaders, meaning supervisors or above in an organization, drive much of the positive or negative emotions by their actions or inactions, their words, or what they fail to say. When a manager chooses their words and their actions carefully, they exhibit great emotional intelligence. These managers are often thought of as leaders who care, or as I like to call them, leaders with heart. This special brand of leader drives engagement and loyalty simply by being themselves. Are these leaders perfect? Absolutely not. It is in their awareness and sharing of some of their imperfections that we realize their brilliance. In this podcast, I ask you to see yourself in the stories my guests tell about times when they were not the best versions of themselves, but how they used their hearts to guide them to a place of deeper connection with their teams and heightened leadership prowess. Enjoy. Hello, everybody. This is Heather with the Leadership with Heart podcast, and I'm very excited today to have Rich Gassen on the phone. Everybody that comes on the show is either invited personally by me or someone's referred them, and I've kind of had a chance to qualify them. Because to be honest, if someone asked to come on my show, they're probably somebody I don't want on the show because it really is those people who are more humble and aren't really realizing their impact in the workplace. So Rich is on the call because he's been out there interacting with me on LinkedIn for quite a while, and I just see the type of content he puts out there. I see the level of caring that he has, his desire to grow himself and the people around him, whether they report to him or not, and just his deep desire to always learn. So he's here for that reason. He does supervise people, but I really think just the heart that exists inside of him is one of the reasons why he's on the show. So welcome, Rich.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me.
So where are you right now in your leadership journey?
Well, I am currently supervising a staff at the UW-Madison print shop. So we have a group of about 40 people here total, and I supervise 15 of them. And I've been a supervisor for about 6.5 years here. I've been working at the UW for 8. Prior to that, I worked in print shops and pre-press environments for all of my adult life. So I've been kind of a leader by design, but not by title for most of my adult career. This is my first position where I was actually a supervisor, where I had a little bit more say and control over how things might go. So really, for me, the last 6-7 years here, I've been working very hard at trying to build a team atmosphere, work on empowering my staff in order to allow them to make decisions on their own and kind of be their own leaders, I guess, is the best way to describe it. So, yeah.
Love that. I love that. And actually, what's so great about having you on is you maybe this is a nuanced one. Of everyone else up to this point has been very seasoned leaders, just have been doing it for a long time. And I like the fact that you had been in the workplace for a while, but now in the last 6 years recent, this is a different way for the listeners, just picking up on this. It's a great way for those who are listening that may be coming to the place where they're newer in the title part of leadership. And then Rich can then provide some context for that. So that's good. I appreciate that. Now, when you say UW, can you expand on that for the listeners? What's UW?
Yeah. So that's the University of Wisconsin-Madison. We are, the print shop here is the largest public sector print shop in the state of Wisconsin. So we have a pretty large facility, actually. A lot of times people think of a print shop on a campus that might be a little copy shop where there's a few little printers in the corner, but we have very large equipment. We are probably on the scale of the Madison and Dane County area where we work, we're probably about the middle of the size of the types of printers that are in this area. This area is very saturated with printing for some reason. The Wisconsin and Chicago area has a lot of printers in it. So it's a very fertile area for that type of work. I came to the UW after working at a couple of different private sector places for a total of about 18 years. I came to the UW for a little bit more job security because the printing industry, if people know about it, has been a little bit unstable, especially after the 2008 bubble burst. So the University of Wisconsin offered some job security, some better benefits than a private sector job could offer. So I actually came here as a production employee back in 2010 and worked for a year and a half. And then there was a supervisor position that opened up in a different department in the offset print production area. And I applied for that and was accepted for that job. So that's how I got to where I am today. So, yeah.
Awesome. I love it. I love hearing that journey. And I wanted to just clarify for the folks that were that were listening in what UW actually was. So,
Sure.
okay. So what is it, knowing now that you have been here doing this 6 years and you decided to take on that the supervisor role, what is it that actually drives you to lead?
Well, quite honestly, I just love printing, first of all. So, coming from a production background, I've always been driven by the final product looking better than the customer expected, and really providing legendary customer service externally and internally, and finding process improvements in the manufacturing steps all the while. Seeing a team gel as a group has always been very rewarding for me, as an employee and now obviously as a supervisor. So, having people become more empowered and committed to the department's mission, I end up with a little bit more free time now. I've given my staff a little bit more responsibility and delegated some tasks to people. It empowers them, but it also frees up some time for me to be able to do some other extracurricular things. I hadn't mentioned yet, but I also the chair of a group called the Campus Supervisors Network, or CSN, and this is a group on campus that facilitates events like networking events and social gatherings for managers and supervisors so that we can all improve our abilities to lead on campus. This group kind of started out as a grassroots group of managers who wanted more options for networking and training. And over the past 4 years now, we've grown to a point where we have over 500 managers on an email list, and we have a very robust website that has links to resources. It mentions events that we're going to put on, things like that. So again, having the empowerment of staff and the ability for some of the employees here to kind of take on some extra responsibilities has allowed me to be able to venture off into this different direction on campus. And it's really growing by leaps and bounds really for there. So being the chair of that group, it's helped me grow in my supervisor role by seeking out sessions of value for other people. And then I also, of course, attend those sessions. And we commonly have guest speakers who will talk about different information, but sometimes it's actually some of the planning committee that put on events. And that's really how I was led to meet you online on LinkedIn, Heather, where I recently did a couple of sessions on fostering a culture of recognition and appreciation in the workplace. And quite honestly, I started with your book, and law number 2 in your book from the 7 Intuitive Laws of Employee Loyalty is, about appreciating your employees. And so I use that as kind of the foundation of my discussion. And then I ventured into different discussions from people online from LinkedIn, like Daniel Pink on his intrinsic motivation, promoting the concepts of autonomy and purpose. I used some information from Kimberly Davis's book, Brave Leadership. And also Lally Daskell has a book called The Leadership Gap. So information from those and other people from online sources, LinkedIn, et cetera, where I was able to do a pretty nice presentation for managers on campus, and I've actually been asked a couple of times to do that presentation again in different places on campus. So
nice.
Worked out quite well.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. And I love the way you, number one, that you got all of us involved. And I know you chatted with each of us first to make sure that was okay. But the way you got all of us involved and used all of that knowledge, sometimes we find that people give us leadership resources and books and things, and we look at it and then we put it in the drawer and it becomes dust, right? And we may or may not do anything as a result. And I love the fact that you took it and said, again, took it upon yourself to say, I'm going to, take their voices, their concepts, and I'm going to share this with people who may not otherwise have that in their hands.
Right.
And bring it to the top, like bring it to the surface. So I think that's wonderful that you did that.
Yeah, and I think that all of those books that I mentioned, there were several more that I've taken information from, but sometimes the concept, like for example, Kimberly Davis's book, Brave Leadership, didn't necessarily have a lot to do with culture of recognition and appreciation, but there were definitely parts within that book that, were valid for that topic. So I was able to kind of mine different information from all those different resources and all these great people on LinkedIn, this, fantastic network, and go from there and put together a pretty nice presentation for people to use. And I actually have those materials on the CSN website, so anyone can download the materials that I used for that presentation.
Oh, that's great. Oh, look at that. See, look, you hear that, listeners? There's actually a resource out there for you. I'll make sure to put that actual URL and put that in the show notes too. And that way everybody can go access that. Okay, so the folks that you lead right now, what do you think they would say about your leadership style? So often I'll say, what's your leadership style? And people are like, well, I don't quite know. But what do you think your team would say about your leadership style?
Well, I'm pretty laid back as far as a manager goes. I don't get very excited about issues as they come up. First of all, I'll describe my work environment. I work right in the mix with my staff. My office is in the production center. The door is always open. I can see people working all the time. So I'm actually fortunate that I'm right alongside all of the staff that I supervise. I've always had a mantra kind of that I've lived by that says, show up and participate. And for me, that means always be present, always be engaged with people. Obviously, it means come to work for starters, but really show up and participate for me has always been the way to, describe to other people what I'm looking for in them. And I think that they would say the same of me, that I'm always engaged. I try to always have a positive attitude as I'm at work. I'm excited to help people, solve the daily challenges that we take on. Like I said, I don't get too upset or excited when there are issues. We try to solve them as a team and learn from them so we can hopefully be avoiding them in the future. I've been in production environments long enough to know that getting angry doesn't do you any good. So my staff really would probably say, he's pretty laid back, he's pretty casual about things, but, we're still serious about the idea that we want to get work done and do a quality job and output, the product as needed for the customer. So, one of your laws was describing in law number 1 of the book that you wrote, it describes how do you show up as a leader and how do you handle setbacks. So like I said, pretty laid back, but my staff knows when it's time to get serious, and they know the mission of the department. We took it upon ourselves a few years ago to kind of rewrite the mission and strategic vision of our department and what our goals are as a unit. And we actually printed them out on large format signs in the shop and have them posted pretty much within sight anywhere that you're working. In fact, I'm sitting in a conference room right now, and I have the mission statement on the wall right next to me. So anytime we're engaging with staff, we can look back to those guiding principles and talk about how, we're intending to be creative and we're intending to, meet customer needs and things like that. We even use those guiding principles within our yearly reviews and things like that, and when we're talking, even if I was in a situation of disciplinary action with an employee, I could be referencing back to those, this was what we were hoping for. So, yeah, I mean, I guess, when you say, what do my staff, what would they say about me? Hopefully they would say that I'm, easy to work with. I try to be lenient as far as things like flexible time off for family and for health reasons and things like that. On this campus, I don't have a ton of control over pay. So it's not like a private sector where I could look at someone and just say, hey, I'm going to give you a pay raise today. We're kind of governed by some state agency type policies and things like that. So I had to look for other ways of making sure that people have, a full benefits package for themselves. A lot of that is flexible hours for work, giving them extra job duties that might be of interest to them or stretch goals and things like that. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, that's awesome.
Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, that did. It answered it very well. In fact, so much so I want to jump off of a couple of those. So
Sure.
I love this idea that you said you took it upon yourselves to rewrite your mission. Okay. And
Yeah.
Right. And put it out in front of you. It's so, I talk about that in my book, but I talk about that generally. It's so important. You hear about this all the time, this mission vision, and it sits somewhere, in dust or on the wall, but no one's actually exercising it, and no one's ever actually making sure things are aligned with that. So I love, number one, the fact that you did that. I also love the fact that you did that in your print shop. This is not like your GE, right? And I think the reason why I think this is interesting is I think we overthink this a lot. People think that you have to be a massive company or large organization or strategic, whatever, having some senior person responsible for this. And you're a supervisor over, directly a staff of 15, indirectly, 40 total. And you took it upon yourself to get this done in a team environment where you all got buy-in into what this is going to look like and what it should be. And now you're able to hold each other accountable. So I love the fact that you talked about, when you're at the point where you may have to discipline or you have to call someone on the carpet or you have to course correct with someone, that you're able to say, these are the values or this is the mission, remember? And we all came up with this. We all agreed to it. And you're able to point to that as kind of the North Star for the group. So that is just amazing. That's one thing. And you can comment on that in a minute. The other thing, because I don't want to forget about it, is the level of emotional intelligence, basically emotional management you exhibit when you're in these situations that you described. Maybe they're just times where they're going awry, and you say, I don't get too upset. I'm laid back. I don't get too upset when this happens, because anger is not going to change a thing. We have to kind of get to the solution. Right. We have to work as a team. So those are two concepts that, boom, boom, hit me right in the face. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. So the emotional, self-management, have you always been that person who just is able to kind of control the emotions and kind of let it slide off you? And then the other thing is this idea of being able to point, to that wall and point to the people who you had the buy-in with initially on this mission, vision, values, whatever it is you have on there, and how that looks.
Sure. Well, I will say that I have not always been this stable person, because when I used to work in the production environment, say in the previous jobs, I was younger and I was probably a little more arrogant and hot-headed at some points. But I learned over time that, if I did blow up, the actions after that, it didn't help the situation. So you basically train yourself to say, how would I handle that the next time? And you learn over time that a little more professionalism and a level-headedness wins in the end. So that was something that I learned, literally through 20 years of being in a production environment. Quite honestly, the print production environments that I've been in, sometimes they're quite hectic, and there's a lot of deadlines and you're under a lot of pressure. So like I said before, blowing up just doesn't solve that problem. So you learn how to deal with those situations. We're constantly in a kind of feast and famine sort of environment, where one day it might be super busy and the next day you're looking at people and saying, who wants to go home early? But you have to be prepared for either one of those situations walking in the morning. As far as, managing in that environment, it's the same situation of when other people get excited, I try to bring them back down to earth through whatever methods it is, talking them off the ledge, if you will, or whatever. And like I said, I've been in this business for about 26 years. So it's been something I've learned over all of that span of time. But by the time I became a supervisor, I was already kind of at a point of saying, it doesn't help to get excited. As for the mission statement, I'll just read the 6 principles that we have as headlines, and then we have more content under them. But our 6 basic principles are open communication, creativity, fiscal responsibility, cooperation, commitment to excellence, and continuous improvement. And you said it's nice that we have those hanging on the wall. It's like literally, I can point to one of those examples or a situation where you say, this isn't being very fiscally responsible, when someone might do something in the shop. Or another time when we use those guiding principles is really when we're making decisions as management teams. For instance, purchasing new equipment, hiring an extra employee, or saying maybe we don't need an extra employee. We're looking back to that list of principles, and other people can hold us accountable for them as well. So we really do try to live and die by those principles now that we've committed to them. So yeah.
Love it. I love that. I love that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I've worked in smaller organizations, I've worked in larger organizations where there's thousands of employees, and I often find that is the disconnect. The disconnect is in not, basically connecting the dots between the actions that we're taking or failing to take and the things we promised to ourselves and to the organization we would be doing. So
right.
Again, I can really appreciate that that's the place. So, okay, we all can hear how wonderful you are. And now is the time, because you've heard my podcast before. I'd love for you to just tell us a time when maybe, you weren't the best version. You did talk about a little bit when you're talking about the emotional self-management, but can you think of a story or a time where you just weren't the best version of yourself, and what did you do, kind of some specific steps that you did to come out of that place?
Yeah. So one thing that comes to mind was early on in my supervisory role here, I had a few troubled employees that I had inherited. And so I started out dealing a lot with disciplinary action instead of team building. So I was kind of juggling between those two. And I spent a lot more time with the disciplinary action side. But so I had attendance issues for some people. Others were just not on board with the work ethic that we had and the teamwork that I was trying to promote. So a couple were not going to change no matter what they did and what I tried to push on them. And so I got to the point of disciplinary action with them. And I had to say that this being my first supervisory role where I was actually in that position to do those things, I was not prepared for those. So I felt like I got into a lot of stressful situations where I didn't really feel comfortable handling it. And so I really had to take it upon myself to look for further training and, resources for myself. My direct supervisor was extremely helpful because he had been in those situations prior to me coming on. But seeking out professional development for that type of thing. And then ever since now, and it's part of this Campus Supervisors Network, providing training to other managers so that they can also be better prepared for situations, whether it's disciplinary action or, talking about benefits or hiring employees or whatever. So really, for me, early on as a supervisor, it was making sure I had the resources available to me. And like I said, when I wasn't the best leader was early on when I was kind of winging it at the beginning. Even though there were resources on campus, I hadn't necessarily taken on, attending classes or things like that for all of that. So that was probably the biggest thing. I would say other times when I wasn't a best leader would be earlier on in my previous roles where I was not actually a manager, but I was kind of leading a department in the pre-press group or things like that. And like I said, earlier in our discussion, sometimes you would get a little bit too excited or you'd go off on a rant when it wasn't necessarily the right thing to do. And either later you're going back and apologizing to the person that you had done that with, or learning from that mistake and saying that didn't work out. I need to act differently in that situation.
Yeah, and that's interesting that you say that because I talk about, and this leadership at heart is obviously focused on folks that are leading others, but there are so many people that are leading others that don't have titles. And so
right.
you express that. And so oftentimes, if we're looking at even a career path or wanting to get promotions, a lot of the leading takes place before the title ever happens. And in this
absolutely.
You were able to admit this mistake that there were times you went off on a rant, or maybe your emotional self-management wasn't as tight, but you were able to kind of realize that and bring it in. And now you're at a place where you're a lot stronger in that area.
Right.
I know exactly what you mean. I'm much better in the workplace than I'm at home. I'm going to be honest. There's sometimes when it comes to that emotional self-management, we can't be perfect all the time. Right. So at work, people would hardly ever see me angry or anything like that. And if I would ever be irritated, people would really be like, oh, because they would never see that of me. And then at home, it's sometimes it's just not that way. You can't keep it all together. So 4 kids later.
You have a different emotional investment in the home situation. So I have to admit that, yes, I don't handle things probably as smoothly at home as I do at work. One thing I wanted to mention is, I have a lot of staff now that were in the same position that I was in my previous jobs, where they are natural leaders. I mean, right now I'm in a meeting with you and there's people still leading the work in our production area. So I have several people that have come to me and asked questions about, how could I handle this better? Or I'm actually struggling with another employee and communication with him. So is there something I could do differently? And I've sought out, we have plenty of training at the UW-Madison campus here for things like conflict management and communication styles. So I've sought out training for some of the staff just so that they are better prepared. And like you said, they're on a path maybe to become a supervisor at some point in their career. So making sure that they have the tools and resources available to interact with each other right now and in their future is important to me as well.
Oh, see, when you say this kind of stuff, it makes me realize why I have you on the show. You just put a dot on the I for the reason why you're on the show. This idea of, number one, you're not afraid or threatened by these people's desire to obviously lead and to do well and to probably progress. You are, like the video I just did the other day where you're looking for their strengths. You're seeking to uncover the things that make them great and how they can, put that to work inside the organization and for any other organization going forward. And then the other thing is that it's a nuance here, but you are using the thing that happened to you that, where you said I wasn't the best version early on to become the person that you are today. You're using that idea of seeking out training for yourself, seeking out resources to make you better, and you're giving that back to your team. You're saying, they also need the resources to make them better. So again, this is packed full of so many things and so many directions that we can go. I'm noticing these little subtleties. So hopefully the listeners are taking this in as well. There's just a lot to be learned here. Seeking out the resources for staff, making sure they have the right tools so that they can work inside their current roles effectively, but also that they can grow as future leaders of that organization or other organizations. You care for them as people, so you're willing to put that time in.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's that saying of, what happens if I train them and they leave, but the other saying is what happens if I don't train them and they stay. So I think we all win when they improve their communication skills or their conflict management skills. Everybody benefits from that, and they become a better team as a result of that, which then makes my job easier. So it's definitely something. I actually, on a little side note, one of my staff is a high school football coach, and he's relatively young and inexperienced at communication, and he was really struggling with communicating with the parents of some of the football players. So I sent him to a couple of classes to benefit him in his football coaching career. And of course, it's helped him in the shop as well. But I even sought out that just to make sure that he was better aligned with, handling those situations, because he was struggling early on as a football coach. So I felt that was a little bit of a success for, him and me as well. So.
Well, I think so, particularly when we think about successful leaders, they're the ones who really care for the whole person. So they take the entire person in. And those who don't do well, for example, if you're looking at 360 feedback and you're seeing what team responses are as it relates to their manager, they don't do well in the areas where it's not the whole person that's be considered. It's like their job function. And just as long as they're doing their job, that's what their manager, their leader's looking at. In this case, to you taking in that whole person and saying, we want to help this person holistically, it says a lot. The future is bright in my eyes.
Yeah, and you have to look at knowing that we're all humans and we have home lives and families and illnesses and things like that. You have to look at that whole picture and make sure that everybody is, being taken care of all the way around. And that's kind of the work-life balance part of making sure that people can take care of family needs and things like that too. So that's where I've talked about flexibility in scheduling. I've got a couple of staff members with sick parents or sick family members, and making sure that they have the latitude to, come and go as they need to be with their parents or go to appointments and things like that is very important as well.
So what are the things that you do when things get crazy in the print shop, and it's just like, he's probably busy all the time, but when it gets maybe very heightened season and you come out of that and you want to reconnect with the team, what do you do to reconnect with your team in a deeper way?
Well, first of all, like I said, I work right alongside of them. So I am talking with people, hour by hour and day by day, whereas a lot of managers that I'm aware of, work in a different office or a different building than their staff. So they really have to take more of a concerted effort to engage and connect with their employees. So I'm fortunate in that I'm talking with them every day, a lot of times about personal or social things or sports or whatever, and making sure I know their situation and their needs. When we get a little bit slower, I tend to have short team meetings about every 2 to 3 weeks just to talk about current jobs in process or a situation, staffing changes, things like that. Once in a while, we'll engage in a little bit of extra project or something like that, where we do it as exercise or something like that. Actually, recently I just did an exercise where I asked staff to recall a time when someone else in the production area helped them out when they were struggling, or volunteered to help take over a project for them, or taught them something that they didn't know so that they could become more efficient in their role. This was a little bit different for them. So I actually gave them a homework assignment and they had to come back with their answer. So we got together a few days later and everyone answered the question with some pretty cool stories actually about some of the roving leaders in our group. Every employee's name was mentioned at least once. Many times, people's names were mentioned several times. And it reinforced the team's reliance on each other. And it showed gratitude really for the things that we do for each other every day that kind of go unnoticed. So I really appreciated that. But after the exercise, one employee emailed me back saying, "Thank you for helping create the atmosphere where teamwork can prosper and is appreciated." And I felt like we succeeded in a team building exercise there. It's one of those things where this stuff is happening every day, but you don't take the time to recognize it. Mm-hmm. So just literally saying, point out a time when someone helped you. And everybody, like I said, they went around the room. One of the guys actually named everybody else in the room at one point. He came up with 14 examples to say, I remember when he did this for me, and just yesterday, this guy did this. And so it was really kind of eye-opening to everybody to say, we do rely on each other all the time. Sometimes you forget that your teammates are there or whatever, but it really helped solidify the idea that we are a team, and you need the team to be successful every day. So that was one example. We try to do a lot of just social gathering type things in our department as well, with all 40 people, where we do cookouts pretty regularly. One of the staff members took it upon himself, a prior job that he worked at, they used to have a community lunch day. So once a month, he arranges catering into the shop and asks for, donations towards the cause. But it's nice because it brings together, we kind of have 3 different departments here. We have a customer service area, which is it's upstairs from our production area. And then we have 2 different production departments. I've supervised one, and there's another supervisor for the other half. And so we kind of have 3 different departments, even though we all work together to some degree. And like this community lunch is a great example where it brings 20 or 25 of us together once a month. And you sit down with someone from the customer service department and you talk with them about what's going on in their lives. And you connect on a different level with the people from the other parts of the department. So that's kind of cool.
Mm-hmm. That's very cool. I love it.
Yeah.
These are 2 very good ideas that I have not heard before. And so again, listeners, hopefully you're taking this in. I love that idea of pointing out a time when a person in the room has helped you and have them go around. And the idea that it creates this idea of gratitude, and also this idea of reliance between each other, realizing that it takes a team to make it work. So it's the manager of the team, the supervisor of the team, the director, the leader of the team that's responsible for the team cohesion. But what I love about your group is you're responsible to the extent that you allow them, they're empowered. So you allow them to kind of make decisions independent of you. They may pass it by you, but in the end, they are self-directed, and you allow that. Again, there's not this being threatened thing that you have to be the one that drives every single one of these things.
Right. And they have the confidence to know too that, the decisions that they make, I'll back them up. And it might not be the exact decision that I would have made, but we'll talk about that, maybe next time we would do it a little different. But knowing that, like, in my absence, they can make decisions, and I will support them, whatever that decision is, because I know that they're following that, the guiding principles.
Yeah. Like I said, there's so many, I could be on this call for hours. I can tell you, I can probably slice and dice this many ways. I'm going to try to move it along. I know.
Sure.
This is really good. I love this idea of the fact that the staff is self-directed, but you were self-directed before you became a supervisor. You did a lot
Correct.
of things, you took on the leadership role. So it makes total sense that you are going to kind of continue that on with your team. And then the idea that you're going to support them and back them because you're very aware that they're living by the guiding principles. Again, super powerful. I mean, the larger organizations could learn a thing or two from your small shop over there, or is big for you, but small relative, right? They could learn a thing or two. So this is some good stuff. Okay. So then in that light, for the leaders that may be listening on, that could be struggling in their leadership, they could just be at a rough spot, questioning where they're at. What maybe piece of wisdom would you want to leave them with?
Wow. I guess I'd say that, this needs to be a continual process improvement initiative for each of you. I feel like professional development is key for staying fresh and being ready to lead others effectively. I mean, I'm fortunate really because lifelong learning is easy on the UW-Madison campus. We have a lot of resources from our human resources department. I've learned a ton from the LinkedIn members that I follow, like you, Sarah Elkins, Jeff Hagan, Bruce Kasanoff, Amy Blaschka, Melissa Hughes, Kimberly Davis, and so many more. I mean, that network of people that you and I are associated with is just fantastic for learning all of these tools. I've read a ton of books. I went back to college and actually finished back in 2013. And after I was done with constantly having the regimen of studying for college, I kind of took on reading leadership and management books as replacing that pocket of time that I had carved out for school. So I've read a lot of books over the last few years. Yours was one of them. And I think that that's something to, continue to do and always try to look for new resources, whether it's a book or an online blog or whatever. One of the books I just actually finished was a book called Leadership is an Art by Max Dupree. And he talks about the idea that you are bound by a covenant as well as a contract in your work environment. I thought that was a really interesting concept. The contract is the fact that you show up and you pay, we pay you for your and provide benefits. You came and you're doing the job you do. But the covenant is being guided by the department's mission and vision and wanting to fulfill that mission regardless of the pay and the benefits. So it's not, saying, well, you're paying me this much an hour, so I'm going to do this much work. It's saying, I'm here to do the job, and, the pay is great, but I want to meet that mission. So I really found that interesting as an idea of, you're bound by this covenant to come to work. And I think I've always been a covenant kind of guy at every job that I've worked at as an adult. And, I strive to have the staff here that are also driven to provide that kind of legendary service to our customers at all costs. I'm also a big proponent of getting to know your staff, and so that you can tend to their needs on that personal level. I described some of those things already. But as I mentioned, I'm lucky to work alongside my team as opposed to being isolated from them. Like I said, several people have health issues. Being flexible with their hours or absences is part of the benefits I can offer them above the pay and the work conditions. Being accessible to them also is a huge advantage because everybody is comfortable talking to me about anything, work-related or not. I know there's a lot of situations where people are somewhat afraid to talk to their supervisor about non-work things. And I think that it's important to understand those employees as a whole. Lastly, as a first line manager, I have great support from above, which is very beneficial for my ability to make decisions without always checking off with my manager. So I kind of have the same situation that I've given my staff. Building that relationship has been key for me. And my supervisor and I have that same vision of the facility, how we would run this place. So that's been important for me all along as well.
Wow, I love that. Those are great.
The last thing you had asked about things that had shaped my my leadership style. The very first job that I worked at was I shouldn't say the first job, but the first adult job that I worked at as a in a printing environment. I had a supervisor. His name was Kevin Lucius, and he supervised the staff the same way that I aspire to now. So I really kind of learned some of what I'm doing now by seeing it in another manager. And I've never really had another supervisor since then that acted in that way. But Kevin was really, he gave staff the latitude to explore ideas and come up with solutions instead of being micromanaged. However, he was always accessible to give the help that we needed when possible, and even join us in the trenches. And I remember one time when I was working on a pre-press problem, we were trying to do trapping on a job, which maybe you don't know what trapping is, but we were working on computers trying to figure out how to solve a problem. And he stayed with me till 2 a.m. in the production environment, and we solved it together. And that kind of feeling of, he had my back and he was there with me the whole time, that really resonated for a long time. And I appreciated that I had that kind of support. But he also gave us the latitude to venture out and try things on our own when we had, a different idea of how something might get done. And I've always kind of handed that to my staff downstairs as well in our production area where, there's not one way to solve a problem. There's multiple ways. We've all come from different environments. Nearly everybody in my production environment has worked at different print shops before this. So we come from, a vast array of different management styles and different equipment and different ways of solving problems. So I don't want to go downstairs and talk to someone and say, this is how we do this, because they might have seen a much better way of how to do it at a different place that they worked in the past. So really for me, early on, seeing how Kevin managed his group at that previous job and taking the best parts of what he did and importing it into my management style, and also in situations where you had bad managers and knowing that didn't work for him, it surely didn't work for me as the employee of that bad manager, and making sure you don't have those things in your arsenal. That's kind of the goal of what I had when I became a supervisor of how I would lead others.
Again, there's a lot here. I could go down so many different tracks just on this, and we may very well be getting back together on this. There's so much here
I'd love to.
I like this idea. I do talk about this idea of a contract inside the book, and it's very true. And I think I love this idea of covenant and mission and vision.
Mm-hmm.
And often when I talk, I'm talking about, leaders' responsibilities to team members. And occasionally I'll bring in what the responsibilities of the team members are back to the leader, but most often than not, I'm talking about what the leaders are needing to do for the team members to keep them there, right? So I like this idea of this covenant, which is really kind of interdependent. It's back and forth. And there's that expectation expectation that's there, but there's the just deep desire, irrespective of benefit, to want to lead that way. And so what I often say is that's wonderful to have someone just automatically like you, your North Star is just to be that covenant type of guy, that mission vision driven guy. Sometimes what I found, or often really in workplaces, is that people they're not as much into mission vision. It's only because they haven't seen it lived out inside the workplace. If I think on the opposite side, they saw it being lived out like you did early on, where you were able to kind of emulate that style, then more people would be mission vision covenant focused. So it's just an interesting paradox that I think that we're in the workplace, and trying to work our way out of that. The other thing, this idea of being, everybody being comfortable talking to you being accessible, but just the idea of people being self-directed, this empowerment is key. So I love all these things that you've put out there for the nuggets, and for the listeners, I know that you've probably taken away a lot, just as much as me going wow, 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 and writing lots of notes. I will have this all written up in the show notes. So if they want to get a hold of you in any particular way, is there one way you'd like for them to get a hold of you?
I think LinkedIn is probably the best resource to contact me.
Awesome. And I'll make sure to put that also that @ sign or whatever the URL to your profile inside the show notes as well. This has been amazing. Yeah. Like I said, I could go on forever and ever, but I know we have to end it. And I will end it on that note of be empowering and accessible. This has been awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Leadership with Heart podcast. You can grab the show notes by visiting customerfanatics.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter.